in internet studies, who is talking about influencer cultures on TikTok. We will run slightly over 1 o'clock. Those people that want to leave the BC's forum, please feel free to go at whatever point suits you best. We will not be offended. For those staying, we will probably run till about 1:15, 1:20 with question time.
Okay, we will. Thanks, Tama. Thank you everyone for hanging in there, and thank you computer gods for letting me do this. I'm going to be covering a very tiny portion of some brand new research I've been doing lately on TikTok. Specifically, I've been on this obsessive research trajectory over the last few years trying to understand the concept of internet celebrity and influencers. And I'm slowly taking over the world, looking at each platform. And from my last book on Tumblr, I'm now deep diving into what internet celebrity looks like and what influencer cultures look like on TikTok. To begin, I have probably shown this slide a dozen times here at Curtin, but I would like everyone to get the idea that influencers tend to be the epitome of internet celebrities. They are the top of their game. They are the A-list internet celebrities who manage to make this a long-term career, who manage to do this based on positive reputation, and who can earn an income out of this. This is not to say that anyone who's not successful in any of these verticals is not an influencer. They could be on the way as an influencer aspirant, or they could be any other variety of internet celebrity. Say, for instance, many people go viral as memes, in which you recognize their face, and that's about it. You probably don't know their names, don't know anything else about them. Some other people go through accidental virality, whether on Twitter or on cancel culture online. They don't intend to be famous, but it just happens to be such. So they constitute some form of internet celebrity, but they're not necessarily influencers. What I'm looking at today, though, is this continuation from internet celebrity to influencers. Another big question that we tend to consider when we talk about influencers is scale. How much money do you have to be earning? How many subscribers do you have to have before you're considered a real influencer? And there are a lot of factors into play here. In this table, I have tabulated and scaled what these 5 different genres of influencers look like in a country in the Nordic context. So remembering, of course, the countries there are quite small in population, internet penetration rate is high, but it's mostly young people using these platforms. And here's a brief summary of the types of influencers and the roles they play. But on a space like TikTok, the idea of how an influencer comes about is slightly changed. If we were to think about the likes of YouTube and Instagram, fame used to be based on a persona, in that you remember a person, their role modeling, their online identity, and they had a brand that they would abide to. So for instance, if a fitness influencer were to one day market fried chicken to you, that would be super off-brand and it would clash with her authenticity. In a space like TikTok though, given that the format tends to be privileged on post-first virality, as opposed to profile or platform-first fame, many influencers there get to experiment with genres of content and varieties of aesthetics. In other words, if I'm trying to be a TikTok influencer, I'm not concertedly trying to curate a singular, clean, coherent identity. I am mixing and matching all the different trending keywords, trending hashtags, new filters by the day or by the hour to see what I hit and what I miss. Sometimes if I'm lucky, some of these posts will land on the For You page and will gain me an immense number of followers overnight. So this is something to keep in mind with the difference with TikTok influencers. I assume that most people here have some basic understanding of TikTok. Given that I have to shorten this, I just want to highlight a few key issues that are different from the platforms we're more familiar with, like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. For one, on TikTok, audio memes are the driving template and the driving stream for how content can be stored into repositories. For instance, if I were to open any TikTok post, this person would likely have background music indicated here, and I could click into this button, which then shows me all the posts ever on TikTok to have used this sound. It shows me the original, the number of videos, and how many likes each of these videos have gotten. The ranking of the videos here is not necessarily chronological or in order of views, but TikTok tends to do them by batches. So you would see the high millions, you'd see the 500,000s and above, 100K to 500K, 50K to 100K, so on and so forth, but they're mixed up in that manner. Something to note though, that this sound may be the source that allows you to trace how people are remixing and reusing this audio, but it does not necessarily have to be the only authoritative source. The reason being, a lot of TikTokers wanting to wrestle ownership over viral sounds tend to replay the same music using their own accounts, do their own voice overlays, or sometimes misattribute the ownership of the sounds intentionally. So in this case, while this is one version of how this sound was pioneered and how it gone viral, slowly but surely, it is not the one authoritative source, and there can be many competing claims in this space. The second thing to note is once anything is ranked in a TikTok audio template, filter template, etc., they are traceable. In other words, I'm able to see every single post that has ever used this sound, which is really interesting for meme ecologies and meme politics. It used to be that when we study memes online, even when we're trying to get a paper published and the publisher's like, find the original person who put this photo on the internet and get the meme maker to give you permission, and you're like, how am I supposed to do that? On TikTok, you can do that because if everyone is obedient and has fidelity to the source of the sound or the filter, you should be able to find the originator, and you should be able to find people who are adapting from that sound here. It is also ranked. What this means is that often there is a wrestle for whose sound or whose post gets to be in the upper limits. So for instance, if I am an original poster and my sound has gone viral, it could be that groups of people on TikTok are using this sound in two different ways. One may be something I enjoy, one something more adult, as TikTok tends to be. Here, as an original owner, as has happened on TikTok, I may come forward and say, I like content A and not content B. All the people who are now using my sound for content A, please drive up your engagement so that your sound replaces the top search. In other words, I want to associate my sound to one specific legacy of remix culture and exercise control over something I don't actually have any control over. But later on in my talk, we'll see some of these legacy wars unfold. Another thing to note is that TikTok, from its very early origins as Douyin in 2016 from the Chinese sister app, was already very much into cross-platforming. This photograph I took from one of several movies where in the behind-the-scenes footage of the credits showing on one side and the footage on the other side, this movie and the directors and theater practitioners used their official Douyin account to track what these followers, what these actors were doing, and to sort of transfer their new fame, if they're newbies in cinema, onto a social media space and to catapult them into some sort of internet celebrity, which is a bit of the reverse of what we're used to when high-profile YouTubers or Instagrammers are gunning for a contract with the mainstream entertainment industry to make the leap the other way. And of course, in our age of modernity, anything is possible, including the users of TikTok in rather contentious situations, such as inside a mosque or back in the day, similar to Instagram, at funerals. The last thing I want to note is that as of last week, all of my research is dated because TikTok suddenly announced the TikTok Creator Fund, which means that they were now authoritatively corporatizing the process by which someone can become an official TikTok partner or TikTok influencer. In the beginning, around early August, all that they had announced was that they would set aside $200 million for this. The first batch of claims were sent out to you as TikTokers who could apply through a series of forms to get payment in response or in tangent to how many likes or shares or comments that they got. And more recently, just last week, this was also open to folks in Europe. No word yet on when it will hit us in Australia. So a lot of my research thus far is focused on organic, vernacular, third-party interactions with the TikTok platform to cultivate influencer cultures. This is the conclusion of my study that I'm not going to get to today. It's probably a work in progress, and today I'm going to show you like 5% of what I hope will be a paper, but it's probably going to be a book because I have a disease. The summary of TikTok is that influencers in this space used to behave very differently from influencers in other spaces pre-COVID. But post-COVID, one specific phenomenon on Instagram stories was that the logic, the popularity, and the formula for how to be a good influencer completely changed. For instance, rather than trying to get people to aspire to follow after you with luxury content, a lot of influencers during COVID on Instagram stories were gunning for relatability. They were coming out in their sweats with pimples, crying on camera. Not that this hasn't never occurred, but during COVID, it happened at scale. Secondly, with aesthetics, it used to be that influencers spent a lot of energy and time into the visual theatrics. Tama and I, with our colleague Tim, wrote an entire book on Instagram talking about the Instagrammability of everything and the everything of Instagram, where to get noticed in this space, people were really striving for picture-perfect types of impression management. But in the time of COVID, when all you had was maybe a phone, or if you're confined at home and couldn't go traveling for your very expensive backdrops, all of that gave way to discursive content. And all of a sudden, influencers who didn't really like to talk to their audience had to formulate content and be interactive with people. Likewise, with accessibility, it was during the COVID season that there was a mass explosion of diversity in this space. We had home chefs who became influencers, moms who became influencers, puppies and cats who also became pet influencers in this space, and it was quite democratizing. And therefore, the importance of the body, the body beautiful, the archetypal skinny, blonde, blue-eyed young woman as the prime influencer also gave way to more diverse forms. So, somewhere along February, my template for TikTok influencers was more exciting and novel. Now it's just bled all over Instagram stories, but there are similarities here, and the differences are here at the bottom. What is so interesting about TikTok that distinguishes it from, say, Insta stories? For one, the demographic. TikTok, until today, having been around for about 2-3 years now, is still quite age exclusive in that we refer to it as a Gen Z app or app for young people. It is so exclusive in this manner that there are entire hashtags like TikTokers above 30 or Boomer TikTok or Old TikTok, and old is like 29 years old. They showcase their talents and their marginality in this space. Thematic content is also very different in TikTok in that there is not yet one mainstream way to be a TikToker. It's not like on YouTube where you need to be relatable and have a regular posting schedule. It's also not like in Instagram where you need to have a coherent feed. On TikTok, it seems like anything goes. People have gone viral from one post. People have had 10,000s of posts but not registered a high number of followers or views. And finally, for the attention economy, much to the frustration of a lot of my colleagues and I, we don't actually know a lot about the TikTok algorithm yet, and probably will never get to understand this. In my research throughout the DECRA process so far, I've come close to meeting with an actual physical human TikTok representative about 8 times, and every single time we get to the question of the algorithm, the conversation no longer continues, and then my research has to take another direction. So I think this is something that we still have to work with, and therefore, what we're going to see a lot in this presentation is ideas around algorithmic imaginaries, drawing from the work of Taina Butcher, as well as algorithmic folklore, drawing on the work of Sophie Bishop. How do people envision that these algorithms work, especially if they're influencer agencies? Do they have a concerted archive and documentation of what works in this space and what doesn't? This is a brief chart of my methodology for this talk. The pluses there in orange are meant to signify that there's more in my longer study, but this is what I'm going to be focusing on today. Thematically, what I'm going to be focusing on is this bit in orange, trying to focus on the early adopters of TikTok in Southeast Asia, what some of my informants have called the Asian wave. Now, this is surprising to me when I started this research because TikTok's original sister app, Douyin, was launched a whole entire year before TikTok even came into play. And early on in my research, a lot of my informants in intermediate countries or intermediary positions, say those in Hong Kong, who work in China as well as in the Asia Pacific, did a lot of legwork trying to make Douyin internationalize or to make it legible to people outside of the Chinese market. And yet, when TikTok was introduced, there was not an immediate leap to that app, even though it was so much more convenient. In fact, a lot of my informants tended to wait for the US to take up this idea before they jumped on board and decided TikTok was something worth investing in. I don't have a lot of time to get to specifics now, but if you're interested in Sociology 101, I highly recommend the work of Christine Yano, who studied the globalization of Hello Kitty, and similarly talks about how globalization has been decentered and recentered. It used to be that things had to start from the US and then spread to the world, like colonization. But with Hello Kitty, it originated in Japan, spread a little bit, hopped into the US, and then covered the world. So even if the core was different, it felt like there was a second core for these ideas to spread around the periphery and then to strengthen the first core. And we see something like that happening as well on TikTok. All right, this is where you get to choose your own adventure. It's an excuse for me to decide, for you to help me decide what you want to hear, and also for me to now drink water while you make up your mind. The orange asterisks are my very sneaky persuasions on the slides that I like best, but I'm giving you the illusion of choice. So I will pick the first two that people shout out.
Legacy.
Mm-hmm. Two favorite people. All right, let's go into algorithmic practices. Algorithmic practices on TikTok are very exciting and very varied. This is the batch of research and data I've collected from a concerted and very immersive digital ethnography on TikTok. I started this in June 2019, so it's just about a year now. And every single weekday, I spend at least 1 hour on TikTok. 1 hour is the nice way to show you that I have a life outside. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6. You know how TikTok can be. But for the purposes of consistency, it was a minimum of an hour a day. I took screen grabs. I followed specific TikTokers. I had following and unfollowing practices, liking and liking practices, just to try and feel the algorithm. I also had multiple accounts, experimented with clearing my cache to see what was working and what wasn't, and corroborated with quite a few of my colleagues who had similar practices around the world. So, the first of these algorithmic practices is what TikTokers would call you have entered, in that you have come into my space, a space that is so rare that now that you've come here and I've invited you in, you're obliged to stay a while. Most of the time, the captions are along the lines of, you have now entered McDonald's TikTok. Don't stay if you don't want to because it's McDonald's. Or you have entered Scandinavian alt TikTok. You have officially made it into Black Australian TikTok, and these get more and more obscure. I secretly do wish that Eleanor was here because I picked out this video especially for her, but you can enjoy it on her behalf. This is one genre of this TikTok. So that's Hood Agriculture Alt TikTok, and he is holding a baby chick. Yes, it's very, very specific. If you belong to that subculture, feel free to stay a while. This shows us this idea of silo sociality. It's a concept that two colleagues and I, Catherine Tiedenberg and Natalie Henry, have developed out of our work on Tumblr. Silo sociality is different from subcultures in that there is not a usual practice. It is not a repertoire of things you can do. You don't really have group norms. Instead, silo sociality is very much tied to discoverability of algorithms, and that these days, you don't really actually know the vast material of content out there unless you stumble into it, or you fall into it, or you actually know the exact keywords or hashtags to trigger the system to give you this content. And as more and more algorithm systems and recommendation systems get more precise and more obsessive with leading you down a single path, we also follow and fall deep into silo socials, believing that that is the one way of TikTok. For this reason, you may often hear your students and young people say things like straight TikTok, queer TikTok, boy TikTok, goth TikTok. And to them, there is a whole variety of TikTok that we may never ever know about, even though I spend an hour a day on that platform. The second algorithmic practice is called the if you see this TikTok. This usually comes in the form of posts that just surface on the app with instructions that say, if you see this, you have been chosen. The algorithm is so convoluted, there are so many millions of people in the world, time is so scarce, battery life is limited, that if you happen to see this, it's fate, and therefore we have to interact on this app. If you scroll past and leave this, we will never ever meet again. So it tends to bring out this idea of chance encounters to entice people to stay a while, to interact with them, to link up with a stranger on TikTok, basically to drive up any form of engagement. One of my favorite ones is this random one, where some of these TikToks are made in the future or in the past, and it says, welcome to 27 August. And if you happen to look at this TikTok on 27th of August, it's like you've won a lucky draw. In the comment section, you see a lot of young people going, oh, dreads, I missed this. It was 24th of August. Oh, dreads, 2nd of September, so on and so forth. So there's also a type of gamification happening here among young people in terms of what they manage to come across. Here's one example.
Tonight, time to have a bath. What? Time is a tool you put on the wall or wear it on your wrist. The past is far behind us. The future doesn't exist. What's the time? It's 8:45. Time to have a bath. What?
So it says there are no hashtags here, there are no keywords. If you see this and you see it on this date, it's meant to be. So come into our world and talk with us. And the fridge conveniently leads into a very fancy bar. So you get the idea there. Another algorithmic practice is share or likes for support. This is a practice in which young people usually have a social justice conversation, element, or stance on something. And similar in the way that you would upvote or downvote on Reddit, or retweet if you support something on Twitter, young people encourage each other to like, share, comment in order to show endorsement of these posts. So this is a very nice discursive way of showing, show your allies, show your political alignments, when in actual fact, it's also one of the ways to signal boost these types of content to other people on the platform. Another algorithmic interaction is please interact. These are usually pleas from creators for a variety of reasons, pleading with people to like, comment, follow them for specific reasons. Sometimes, as in the case of these posters from Hong Kong, because they believe that since TikTok was going to be banned in Hong Kong at that time, if people were to like these posts, then there will be traces of these in international feeds from Hong Kongers, who then wouldn't feel like they're trapped in a filter bubble or in a silo. Some other people cite things like mental health reasons, like I really need affirmation today, I'm going to bed. When I wake up, I want to see numbers and metrics, so please like my posts. Others do this as a way to try and augment the feed and the types of content that TikTok feeds them.
Looking back, don't make you hope, go back to cry. Here's $20. The feet taste like Apple Jacks. I'm looking gorgeous, looking back, don't make you hope, go back to cry.
So this TikToker says she's accidentally ended back up on straight TikTok, which she doesn't enjoy. And in order for her to get back onto unstraight TikTok, she's asking for people who belong to all of these legacies to interact with her so that the algorithm knows her preferences. So a few of these include if you're anti-Trump, a K-pop stan, if you're pro-choice, if you play Minecraft, so on and so forth. All right, I think that is algorithmic practices, and we will now move on to legacy practices. Legacy practices here is a genre of practices that I try to identify as people either bandwagoning onto TikTok and trying to extrapolate its logics and practices for themselves, or vice versa, trying to squeeze and manipulate TikTok to accept and adapt the already established norms from elsewhere. So for instance, Instagrammers trying to go onto TikTok and make it a second Instagram. In this one example, we see here 4 different varieties. There are small home businesses who use TikTok to promote their wares. And even though in the TikTok version, there is not yet an option for you to click direct to buy, as you can do on Douyin, there is a belief in the industry that whatever Douyin does, TikTok will probably do years later. So many of these small business owners are trying to build up that follower base. If not for now, the cumbersome method is to follow them, click through a link, go to a website, most of the time go to Instagram now, where you can buy directly from an Instagram account. There are also small businesses giving advice. K-pop stars are starting TikTok accounts in order to get audio snippets of their newly released songs viral through people trying to mimic their dances, even putting out dance tutorials. The last one is an official post from the Washington Post. I will not spoil this for you and show you the state of journalism today when you want to speak to Gen Z. So the caption on top here says, TikTok's lawyers walking in to file a lawsuit against President Trump this morning. Presumably, you get baited by this TikTok headline, click onto their post, click onto the website, and then read the news article. So now news coming to you in 6-second TikToks. That has been content norms and contextualizing different types of content to fit into the TikTok logic. We also have cross-platform influencers, and this was secretly my very nostalgic bit of research, having looked in this area for more than 10 years now. Influencers from every corner of the internet and every platform imaginable had slowly found their way onto Vine. Just the other day, I found Rebecca Black, and young people were apologizing to her for bullying her. Most of these young people were probably kindergarteners who were not very aware of her song at that time, but it was quite nice to see this sudden resurgence of nostalgia here and there. So here in the first TikTok, We've got Jojo Siwa as well as Miranda Sings of television and YouTube fame. We have a Vine star who says that her vocal twirl on the platform made it here. We have our very own Perth homeboy Troy Sivan, who's also now trying to produce and release his EP during the pandemic season and using his YouTube editing skills. And here, one of my informants from South Korea, who is an expert on YouTube for being able to mimic just about every English accent ever possible. If you're curious and interested in any of these, I'm happy to send you down these rabbit holes later on. Next, there are so many very specific and idiosyncratic genres of TikTok, but I've identified at least 4 that have been established on many other platforms prior to TikTok. The first is Kid Talk, because, you know, Kid TikTok. Kid Talk in that there are now entire accounts, and this is where Tama starts to like Twitch, dedicated to showcasing babies, a day in the life of a child, waking up, what your morning routine is like, how your mom massages you in the spa. And the babies are very cute to look at. But because the format of TikTok is a lot more casual and comes out in a lot more smaller bits and bytes than, say, the curation of Instagram or the long-form format of YouTube, you don't get the same panics or scares about how this is an issue of privacy or how you're literally digitizing an entire child's upbringing online, because it's one cute TikTok, it's 6 seconds of your life and you scroll through. There are sometimes role-playing children here, either by the accounts themselves or by fans of the children, and sometimes the kid talkers are fans of each other put into duets, enjoying each other's singing. The second one is not the best example of elderly influencers, but this is my favorite. There are still many other elderly influencers on TikTok who, once they are past the boomer age or past the 29 and over 30 age, suddenly acquire this geriatric cuteness, and people like them on the app if you're at 60 and above. It's like, you're a very cute grandma, I can't believe you know technology and own a phone. Everyone's going to follow you and interact with you in that way. There's also the Laowai phenomenon, which is something that's come out of my research in China, where predominantly foreigners who look very white and very blonde and very blue-eyed impress the internet with their Chinese speaking skills. Although the reverse is not often true when Asians all around the world can speak English very fluently. We used to see this phenomenon of the Laowai Wangkong or the Laowai influencer on Douyin, because on that app, which was domestic, these were foreigners in that space. But now on TikTok, which is an international app, to have this same phenomenon situated there does not lend itself to the confines of being spectated by a Chinese audience. So that mismatch of exoticism is no longer there, and you can see that the impressiveness value from their viewers has also differed. And then dating apps. TikTok is also a dating app. If you'd like to know more, we can chat after this. The Insta influencer. Now, during the COVID-19 period, there was a very huge migration of Instagram influencers onto TikTok. Many of them are folks whom I've been looking and covering my research for years and years. But I've specifically chosen this specific tessellation of them in what my friend Natalie Henry likes to call bougie TikTok, or very rapidly middle-class TikTok. These are influencers who've already established a brand of luxury, upper middle classness, the elite top 1% in society on Instagram, and somehow have successfully managed to replicate that on TikTok to various users. I'd like to show you one of the clips, one unironic one and one super ironic COVID-19 one.
No. 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 Yeah.
So if you're familiar with this sound, it has been used on a variety of TikTok genres such as swiping through Tinder and noping everybody, or picking out food, or being in a crowd looking for cute people at a festival. Here, it's specifically used to demonstrate this person's material and economic capital, also evidenced by the gallery of handbags behind them. The next one is an ironic one in the age of TikTok by one of the OG influencers, Brian Boy.
See a friend because my ex. I'm so proud of myself that I took a bus to see a friend because my ex-husband took my Bentley and my Amex card. I don't have any money for a ticket, so I gave one of my Chanel bags to a man at the bus stop in exchange for his. I elevated my seat with my Hermes blanket. I bought Cartier champagne for the ride. I love upgrading everyday experiences. I feel so accomplished being on other people's shoes. Yay!
I love Brian Boy. On first glance, if you did not know his legacy or the context of this very specific type of parody Instagram influencer, this comes off as distasteful. He even has his first day on the subway, his first day washing dishes, etc. But I find that influencers in his genre and those who practice like him really made a concerted effort to make themselves still relevant in the age of COVID by mocking themselves on this platform. And here, instead of showcasing and promoting the luxury brands, this self-mockery allows people to see them as a form of entertainment, shifting away earlier from that aspiration and more to the relatability. So if we get at the logics of how these people are pivoting, this I think is really quite clever. All right. Now let's look at, one more to mention. TikTok is also much like Instagram in that it can now be a space where a lot of talents, influencers, and creators go there, be discovered by some very amazing body, and springboard into stardom. For example, Wisdom K was a TikToker who often modeled his clothes at home, and young people loved him. Everyone encouraged him to branch out of his comfort zone, to practice as a model, and eventually he did really get signed. So there was a lot of enjoyment and celebration with this TikTok community here. And finally, the TikTok native influencer. There are 4 different examples here, all of which have different intentions. The first one is a Perth-based TikToker, and I really enjoy his content. Most recently, in the age of COVID-19 and after we had come out of our self-isolation, he usually brings TikTokers around WA, say going to a boba store, going to a nightclub, going to a grocery store, encouraging people to believe that one day they can also achieve the normalcy that we thankfully and gratefully have here in WA. But he also normalizes this idea that it's okay to go out and have fun by yourself. There are some tips like how do you make yourself look less awkward if you're in a cafe by yourself? How do you love yourself? He has a very long legacy of being an out LGBT person, and therefore these conversations around maneuvering the COVID-19 situation feel more believable. The second one is one of my favorite informants from Singapore. She goes by the nickname Hijabi Girl. Instead of telling you what she does, I'm going to show it to you.
Does your day go home? Maybe the chef.
So her entire brand is like that. For those of us without the religious context, women who do don the hijab are not usually supposed to remove it in the presence of the public. This is something you do in closed doors, only with your very immediate family members. So for Shah, having branded herself as the hijabi girl or the halal girl, she often tries to portray or make the public understand these qualities of her religiosity, trying to break down the stereotypes and barriers that they are very strict people by tossing in these jokes with generations of young people. Often in the comment section, when people do not read her TikTok and just look at the captions, you see some comments going, oh my God, how can you take off your headdress and wash your hair with shampoo? And other commentators would be like, just spend 6 seconds of your life watching it and you get the joke that she's putting out there. So for Shafiqa, in a point that I cannot really make very deeply in this presentation, TikTok for her was quite an opening, leveling space. Prior to TikTok, where she was based in Singapore, 75% of the population was Chinese, but in the influencer industry, roughly 90 to 92% was dominated by the Chinese population on all the apps before TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and the like. Everything that sort of required embodiment and selling your look and your body to the public in order to push forth a message tended to privilege that race. But in the space of TikTok, where your body is secondary and you have a diversity of content that can pair with, say, humor, and different types of entertainment, this allowed minority creators like her to filter and flourish in this space. In this sense, because Vine was not very active in Southeast Asia at the time, I don't have an exact extrapolation, but from my understanding of research on Vine elsewhere in the world, say in the US and the UK, I also understood that space to be more liberating in that there were different types of content practices that allowed people to achieve fame. Following on from this third influencer on TikTok became an influencer on TikTok, but was also shortly embroiled in a scandal. Long story short, she was a nurse and then became a nurse and then was working from home for a while as a nurse that was managing COVID-19 appointments. So while she was not physically in the hospital for a period of time, on her daily TikTok updates, she still donned her uniform and gave the impression that she was on the front lines. And the TikTokers did very, very investigative work to find out where she works, her actual name, so on and so forth, before it made news in many popular media outlets. So she came out with an apology and then to talk about how with her TikTok fame, this was what she thought she was meant to do, keep up with the brand. And she didn't expect people to believe her TikTok persona to be her entire real life persona. This last one is my favorite. I watched this and then I laughed for 10 minutes. It's from an Australian TikToker, whom I hope one day becomes an influencer because they're so good.
Emilio makes just found out Charlie Emilio makes $100,000 per sponsored TikTok post. That makes me sick in the stomach. And that's why I take Panadol Extra, temporary relief from aches and pains. So I just found out
Australia TikTok is so good. I really think we should all spend a lot of time there. All right, a mini intermission. Actually, we don't look like we're really good on time. So I will show you a very quick intermission on how weird TikTok is, specifically for academic nerds. And then maybe later on, I will wrap up with my last point. So in Gen Z speak, this TikToker is flexing all the famous academics and philosophers who've ever had to babysit him. When this first went viral on TikTok, young people were very confused. And in the comment section here and elsewhere, they were asking who these actors were, if they were like very esoteric European theatre practitioners. Other undergraduates recognized some of the names and did not believe that these scholars were still alive, so they thought that they were all dead white men. So the conversations here were very interesting in that there were many different silos, academic TikTok, young people TikTok, theatre TikTok, coming together to find out where this person fits into. What is his silo? Why is he flexing this? Is he the only person in his silo? I've never seen anybody else do this, but if you come across it, please let me know because I'm so intrigued.
Is it true? Were those all his babies?
I don't know. We can't, allegedly.
Books alone and then being babysat by the books.
Yeah, but who would flex being babysat by academics? Anyway.
Child of somebody.
When I get deeper into this research, maybe I'll let you know. So to end off maybe in the next 10 minutes, I hope, maybe pick 2 instead of 3. This is where I'd like to show you some of my interview data with the talent agencies, influencer agencies, and digital media companies who were onto the first wave of Asian TikTok, or who were the early adopters. As usual, I have very persuasive orange dots there, but if you want to be very rebellious, I invite you to. So,
Norms and features.
okay.
Pause for
Wow.
5 seconds. Anyone that wants to go to the town hall, who wants to be there for one or wants to stream it, now's probably a good exit point.
Farewell. I hope it's not too depressing.
So thank you for coming, nevertheless.
All right, I will do interregionality and norms and features. Thank you, Denise. At least I get to do one that I won.
Can you do agency as well?
Can I do what?
Agency?
Okay, I will try and bend time. That will be my new superpower today. All right, with interregionality, if I were to summarize this, a lot of these Asian agencies who took to TikTok did so mainly for 3 reasons so far, because my research is still ongoing and this is a limited batch of interviews. The first was that they saw TikTok as the American up-and-coming tool to rival Douyin. So while many of them were already familiar with Douyin, they felt that the market could not expand to the US because Americans were not very adaptable to foreign platforms, even though Douyin had a grand new feature of live streaming, of online demand, of straight purchasing. So for them, because of that inertia for adopters in the US to adopt Douyin, they felt that they might as well just get acquainted with TikTok. So for them, this was a regional business move. The second reason for this is a lot of these agencies were seeing this as a response to the rise of TikTok in the West. And as much as they were very confident in the East Asian specific platforms, a lot of people that they worked with in the global North did not have a very firm understanding of the specificities of how things are different. So for instance, up to today, there are people who call Douyin the Chinese TikTok, believing they're one and the same. Up to today, I'm still reviewing papers that call TikTok and Douyin the same thing when they're 2 completely different apps. So there's a lot of confusion here. And in order to help navigate this way, the East Asian companies, Southeast Asian companies have decided that they will just make the effort and extend themselves there. The third reason I consider this regionality is they see these apps as having different holds on different demographics across the world. For them, Douyin was, yes, an East Asian app, but it was also a diasporic app. It could reach East Asian people all around the world. Whereas for them, TikTok was to reach spaces where there perhaps no East Asians at all in the Asian market, for example, India, which was a very big and lucrative market for them. So a lot of their thought processes for whether or not they should do TikTok was always set up in opposition to what came before it, Douyin, and this is why they took very long to lead there. The first person I spoke to is CEO Karl Mark of Hepmill Media Group. For him, it was watching this momentum build in the West that encouraged him to take this on in the East. So as much as he knew that TikTok was booming and growing, he wanted to see what other people far away in the world thought about it. And once there were thresholds met, for example, when even Hollywood celebrities started their own TikTok accounts, that to him was a marker of how this was an app that was here to stay. It wasn't going to be another one of these flash-in-the-pan apps that would die out in a few years. So this was when they made the leap to invest here. For Althea Lim, who is a group CEO of Gush Cloud International, which has a presence in 10 countries, for her, she saw the US as trendsetters, and TikTok was very much like the old legacies of Vine. Her recent endeavors and her recent business expansion has leapt from Southeast Asia to the US, so we can see why she's got a regional perspective here. And she's considering trying to borrow some elements like the YouTube Vlog Squad or the old Vine Squad onto TikTok with her new community. So again, the US was sort of like their marker of confidence that this was going to be a successful thing for them. Third was to do with expansion. This was specifically in response to what clients wanted. Martin Hong, who is based in Sydney and the head of social and digital at Magnum & Co., said that they considered TikTok because their clients wanted to get into the East Asian market, but were not yet very keen to use East Asian platforms specifically. They needed something that was more legible to them, and TikTok seemed like it would be that good fit. And then there was inspiration. Happy Rogers, who was 17 at the time I interviewed her with the consent of her mother, who's also her momager, told me that in a lot of the content that she works out with her younger sister, they tend to look to TikTok for inspiration and then translate that into the Chinese version as the Laowai Wang Hong, the foreigner who can speak Chinese, on Douyin. So here we see a very interesting reverse. Instead of getting content on Douyin and then putting it on TikTok later, they're going straight to what foreigners find exciting, which should somehow be novel and exotic to their domestic Chinese audiences. So that was an inspirational tool for her. And finally, norms. Korean Billy, or Billy Kong, who is an influencer very established on YouTube and more recently on TikTok, told me that the norms and the comments he experienced on TikTok during COVID-19 really demonstrated to him that that was a Western app, even though it was much used in Asia, and Douyin and other variants were still Asian apps. The reason for this is that a lot of the comments he got on TikTok during that time were pertaining to xenophobic comments or racist comments, and it came in throngs and waves such that he felt like he was in a Western environment on TikTok, even though prior to COVID-19 that did not feel like there was that mass of foreigners from the West doing that. So that's a very quick spiel with interregionality. I think we said agencies, was it? Okay. So agencies. Different agencies have different strategies and reasons for why they wanted to seed TikTokers, i.e. groom, talent scout, teach brand new people to become TikTokers in this space. In this paired interview with two talent managers and an accounts exec in Korea, they discovered that TikTok was growing bigger and bigger. And as much as they felt compelled to look to the platform, their customers or their clients were just not yet looking to hire TikTokers, so it would be an empty investment for them. So in this case, they decided that in order not to be left behind by the other East Asian countries, they should prepare. In other words, the legwork that they put into building their TikTok database in Korea may not actually be viable or activated or earning income for some time, but they still wanted to have a leg up against other agencies in Korea who are still sitting back and waiting for customers and clients to ask them for TikTokers before looking into this space. So this was a preemptive move for them. For their partner company in Malaysia, all of these country outlets are independently organized. Their current plan is to build a network of TikTokers, but it's been a long time and they're still looking into what kind of database that they can build. Again, because there's not yet any client on consumer demand, even though it's very, very popular, the link between fame, visibility, and popularity to monetization or commerce was just not there for them. And therefore, even though these creators had internet celebrity, they were not yet viable as influencers. And therefore, the agencies were very apprehensive about making the leap to pump in resources to manage them or to groom them. Her colleague in the Singapore office, who is an assistant digital channel producer and who is physically an assistant to some of the top TikTokers in the country, told me that she focuses on conceptualizing and strategizing content with the TikTokers. It may be just 6 seconds or a minute, but it's a very multi-hour process in trying to get the props right and the filming right. She also sees that TikTok is a growing platform, and as much as a lot of the presently established influencers are going there, for her it's more of like a seeding or an incubator to groom and teach and massively inculcate the next generation of influencers. For example, ideas around visibility logics, around relatability and communication norms online, around the fact that you're now attentive to the digital traces you leave online because people can always backtrace who you are. So TikTok in this sense was like a mass education tool for these young people. And when they're ripe for harvesting, it would seem like they're ready to be enrolled into the influencer industry. Back to Karl Marx of the Hatmill Group. For him, this was a very concerted strategy. They branched into TikTok quite accidentally in mid of 2019 when 3 of their youngest staff, who were below 23 at that time, were on that app. So with his blessings, the 3 staff started an account for the company and accidentally went viral. It was the first time that he realized that if they were already registering a few hundred Ks and had 5-digit followers, in the time where they still had to explain what TikTok was to their clients, then they were way ahead of the game. And this was really true because he ended up establishing just in April this year, the first TikTok exclusive creator agency or influencer agency in Asia, now grooming and looking out for new talents in Singapore, Malaysia, and the Philippines. So the threshold for the followers of the influencers that he wants to pick out, they must have at least 20K followers. But he says very quickly in the Philippines, this jumped to hundreds of Ks because the market is so much more vast. The quality of the work is so diverse that there are many, many avenues for people to go viral and famous. For many of these young people, he says that the biggest difference is just how young they are, compared to, say, when they were grooming YouTubers, video content creators, and Instagrammers. We're talking about middle schoolers to high schoolers with whom you needed to sit down and talk about brand safety, doing things like telling them you cannot just go crazy, you can't say controversial things, these things matter, you need to be more concerted with your posting. It's a lot like impression management, and I guess in the long run, they'll all be LinkedIn ready for jobs. So this, I think, is quite an important observation for a generational shift of how young people use social media as an educational tool or as an inculcation device to indoctrinate them into a very specific school of logics of self-presentation online. Norms and features, there are many, many, many of them, but several of them overlap. For most of the agencies and for the influencers, Sophia Kim happens to be both, a CEO and a talent herself. The key idea or the key interest behind TikTok was its novelty, that simply it was new. She works between Korea and Japan, and in Japan, the market always seems to be slower than the rest of the world by several years. So the sheer idea of moving to video as a format, not just YouTube, but video, was already new to her clients. For the clients who were already on the YouTube bandwagon, introducing the idea of TikTok to them felt like it was a brand new threshold to emerge as leaders in the scene and in the industry. So for that reason, TikTok had that boom just based on the fact that it was rare in quantity in that industry. For these two Korean managers in Seoul, they feel that Gen Z and young people prefer short videos because they're comical and powerful. I pushed them a little bit more to ask them what this means, and it turns out that with long-form YouTube videos, there needed to be a storyline and there needed to be coherence. Whereas with just a few seconds on TikTok, there was all that room for absurdity and really out-of-the-world humor. In other words, I think this was them enjoying what Vine used to afford us, even though it didn't really catch on in the Southeast Asian market at that time. Back to the Hatmill group, humor was very important for them, especially with the TikTok format. Specifically, they enjoyed this one format on TikTok where one person plays the role of several people. Most often you would see like a parent and then a child, a parent and then a child. Sometimes it would be a straight person and a queer person. Sometimes there'll be multiple actors like father, mother, and child, painting out a scenario, whether it's child abuse, domestic violence, parental quarrels, #Asian problems, and the like. And I feel that this really inculcates a generation of young people to hone their acting skills. And indeed, after he gave me the suggestion, I went into very specific rabbit holes on TikTok and found out the entire theatric colleges, entire voice acting academies were seeding their talents there in order to be talent scouted, but were also scouting for new entries and new recruits from this space. So we'd have people doing voice acting, DJ acting, lip singing, singing, acting, and the whole range of theatric practices. This is Shah, the young woman who is dubbed the Halal Girl. I asked her about what the specific norms and features are for her on TikTok, and for her, she realizes that humor has to be key. As much as she has a very established Instagram and Facebook presence in her videos, on TikTok, she felt that in order to get young people continually excited, and in order to get their attention, she needed to turn every trend, every filter, every new audio meme, every new practice into a comedic version. So it really stretched her remixing abilities in order to still keep the friendly vibe of the Halal Girl, talking about serious issues but in a palatable format. She also tells me, or she recounted quite adorably, of going out in public and having young 12 to 13-year-olds screaming at her, going, "You're the TikTok girl," or "You're Shah from TikTok." And the people around her who are much older are like, "What is this TikTok thing? You know, are you an influencer?" So she did not expect to be recognized by people so young. And it was the first time in our conversation that she realized she might be a bona fide influencer, just in a brand new different platform altogether. This is Jang Han-sol. He is a Korean influencer who spent a very long time in Indonesia. He's very talented, super multilingual, and for that reason, he's got a very strong follower base in both Korea and in Indonesia, which is quite an interesting mix. He is not old, but he's TikTok old in that he's 26. And he very honestly told me that TikTok is very hard for him because he's very good at storytelling, he's great as a YouTuber, but on TikTok, these skills don't seem to matter. People are just there for what's funny and what's interesting. And as much as he had a really good ability to edit, to splice, to tell a very beautiful story, young people were just not very interested in that in 6 seconds. So while he felt he was performing excellence, and I did too, it just did not resonate with that age gap of audience given the age gap. Back to Althea, the CEO of Gush Cloud International. For her, the biggest issue with the norms and features is that it's still very limited towards Gen Z. So again, because there is not yet an uptake by the clients, there is not yet an intense incentive for them to sow into TikTok. So here, they have to do a lot of the work of trying to explain to clients how even though the features are different, they can be mappable, AstroTurf, advertising can be embedded, it can still be remixed in creative ways in order to reach an audience that's outside of Gen Z. And surely with K-pop stars lip-syncing their songs on that app, with Washington Post giving you TikTok headlines, you can see how the demographic is slowly broadening and widening out here. Back to the pair of Korean talent managers. This was very interesting to me and encouraged me to now go deeper into what is cringe culture or what the norms of humor are across the East Asian countries that I study. Jiyoung tells me that in TikTok, they don't like cringe things. They may enjoy humor, but the humor on TikTok tends to be very cringe. She wasn't really able to articulate to me what that was, but she could show me in a couple of videos. She says that for the most part, the influencers there, Gen Z and above, tend to still enjoy that cool factor. So we're back to the Instagram logics of curating yourself, but not yet are they ready to put themselves out in the wild, to tease themselves, to be self-deprecating. That said, given that they don't want to be left behind by the other countries, and given that they still want to be leaders in the Korean market, as I've mentioned before, they contracted their first exclusive TikToker shortly after our interview. So they're trying to see how they can make this work slowly but surely in an experimental format. Second last, I also had the great honor of speaking to Happy Rogers' mom, Paige Parker, who was the momager or the self-declared momager of the group. They have a very established presence on Bilibili, which is by a stretch sort of like a YouTube equivalent in China. And they're also quite popular on Douyin. She tells me that for her, the specific thing about TikTok, the norms of TikTok, are that a lot of it out there is very inappropriate. She has a younger daughter who's 12, and she's more experimental than her older sister on TikTok formats, tries a lot of different trends and things, and Paige feels that she often has to step in and tell her daughter what she can and cannot do in this space, because as much as she wants to groom her talent, the norms and the thresholds of morality on TikTok waver so much by the day based on the trends that it's hard to keep track. One day you may be looking at innocent puppies kissing, but the algorithm is sometimes so vague and so specific that the next thing you know, you might end up with softcore porn. And this is very difficult to explain despite the very insufficient age gating mechanisms and the fact that you can report these features whenever you see them. So doing her best as a momager, she felt that she needed to be on all the apps that her daughters were on. She would get a head start, try to understand what the space was, and she used the self-isolation period in Singapore during COVID-19 to experiment with creating content on TikTok, not just observing it, to understand the allure and to understand how best to guide her daughter as a talent, but also as a daughter. Last but not least, Audi Randa, who is the country director of Gashclan in Indonesia, tells me that at the time of the interview, they had signed 10 TikTokers and they were aiming for 40 to 50 by end of this year. I asked him what his criteria was for looking for TikTokers in this space, having had the conversation with him about the different norms and features, lowbrow and highbrow humor, crass humor, and the like. And he tells me that while they were crawling through FYP, the automated process, of just telling them who the top TikTokers were based on likes and follows was insufficient. They needed to have a more qualitative filter for what fame constitutes. So for instance, they were not after the old legacies of people who got famous for provocative dancing on the app. The app may deem that as okay, popular and famous, but for them that was not brand safe and therefore not influencer worthy. He also wanted people with specific talents, knowing that TikTok was a flash in the pan type of exercise, or that it was still in its infancy stages, such that people can go viral overnight, and that's it. That's the truncation of your entire career. So he was really candid when he says, I don't really want people who only talk shit or only do adult stuff just to get followers. They were looking here for some sort of talent, specifically like acting, singing, or hosting. So these were all the different norms and features that the different country directors and talent managers were looking out for. I will probably end with my face to tell you these are my contact details if you've got any further questions. If not, I hand the time back to Tama. Thank you.